going to jump into the biggest thing this week has been about The Last of Us remake. Now, yeah, this is one that people have been debating going back and forth, and I think it's almost like it's insane if you're sitting there, whatever console you play on, if you're defending this right now, to me it blows me away, just because I guess if you've never, the only way I can see people not really fully understanding, grasping how ridiculous it is what Sony is doing with The Last of Us remake is if they're brand new to the franchise. They don't care. They just want to be able to play the single player experience. It's the first time they've really ever heard of The Last of Us or ever really gotten into the franchise. Then I can get like, okay, maybe you're really, really excited for this. But if you, for a lot of people, because the first Last of Us did very, very well. And it was a huge game. One of the greatest games. I would say the first Last of Us, in my opinion, to me for the longest time, and it still is, it's one of the greatest games ever made in terms of a narrative and everything. I absolutely love The Last of Us Part 1. I didn't get into The Last of Us Part 2. The leaks literally ruined it for me, and I had wanted nothing to do with that story, especially because, the beginning and the person who doesn't make it through the game. I don't want to spoil that in case anyone hasn't played it. But now we're here. Now we're here with The Last of Us remake. And people have been going back and forth on whether this is a cash grab. So this was back on July 9th. Okay. This is a tweet here from Robert Morrison, who is an animator at Bend Studio, and they're working on The Last of Us Part 1 remake. And we'll get into all the Bloomberg article after, but he says here, it's just a cash grab in quotations, because that's what people are saying. And he says, actually, it's the most meticulously built and crafted project that I have ever seen or been a part of in my entire career. The highest level of care and attention to every detail possible. And he goes back and forth in the comments. People are talking about the price. And he says here, the price of the game is out of my control and worth is subjective to each individual. You can decide for yourself if you want it or not, which I completely agree with. You get to decide if you want to spend the money on the remake or not and spend that $70 price tag or not. No one's forcing your hand to buy that. We're adults, or people buying the game generally are adults. So that's your decision to make. And it goes on to say, all I'm saying is I am in awe of the work that an amazing group of people did on the project. A tremendous amount of passion was put into it. And you know what? The developers probably did put a lot of passion into it. And this is a big project for them to remake this game. We saw the actual trailer. For... Sorry, one second. This is opening up here. So the actual trailer that they put out, and I would say that was in response to everybody going back and forth on the leaks of The Last of Us. So if we pull up the trailer here, and one of the funniest things that I found from that trailer, because they say, I like how they're like, he says, yeah, it's meticulously crafted and all of that type of stuff, which I believe that, I mean, it is. It does looks much better than The Last of Us Part 3, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, the upgrade from The Last of Us Part 3 is worth like the $70. But there are a few. There's a tweet that I saw, which I find hilarious, and one of the things, because they showed off. Let's go here. They showed this off, right? And this was the one of the scenes that they showed redone, and you can see like graphically looks stunning, but what is going on here? Where did all the NPCs go? There's literally no NPCs. It's just Joel and Ellie running through here, which to me is mind-boggling. And even like you take a look at like the sign on the building, doesn't seem to be there. The light, all that stuff. I don't know if it's just not completed yet, but there's like little things like that when people are going back and looking at like how great the graphics are upgraded and everything. Yeah, they look great. But when you see stuff like this, that again goes to the narrative that it's cash grab for the money, and that sure, it looks better, but there's a lot of things missing from it. And when you take a game and you tear out one of the biggest parts of the first Last of Us was the multiplayer, and then you're charging $70 on top of that, and you're not adding gameplay improvements. Like there was another thing I saw where they showed the leak of the controller layout, and there's no crouch or nothing. In fact, here it is. My no dodge, no prone in The Last of Us Part 1 remake. My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined. So they haven't added any gameplay stuff to this. It's essentially the exact same thing. So a lot of people are upset about this. A lot of people are thinking that this is a cash grab, and I 100% think this is a cash grab. And this isn't the fault of the developers. This isn't the fault of the people that got put on this game. Because if we go back here, we'll go through this article again. This was an article back in 2021. I think it was about a year ago. Or, okay, a little more than a year ago, but April 9th, 2021. This was a Jason Schreier article, which when we talk about Jason Schreier, not everybody's favorite journalist. A lot of people think he's very biased, and I think at times that he could definitely be extremely biased. But he had this about Sony's obsession with blockbusters is stirring unrest within the PlayStation empire. And this was back in April 2021, and now we're really seeing it come to fruition. So he says here, Sony Corporation's Visual Arts Service Group has long been the unsung hero of many hit PlayStation video games. The San Diego-based operation helps finish off games designed at other Sony-owned studios with animation, art, or other content and development. But about 3 years ago, a handful of influential figures within Visual Arts Service Group decided they wanted to have a more creative control and lead for game direction rather than being supporting actors on popular titles like Spider-Man or Uncharted. So Michael Mumbauer took over the direction of Visual Arts Service Group in 2007, recruited a group of 30 developers internally from neighboring game studios to form a new development unit within Sony. The idea was to expand upon some of the company's most successful franchises, and the team began working on a remake of the 2013 hit The Last of Us for PlayStation 5. But Sony never fully acknowledged the team's existence or gave them funding and support needed to succeed in the highly competitive video game market, according to people involved. So this is where it all starts. So it's these guys that they've worked on Sony games and been a big part of deciding like getting these games out there worth the quality that they are. They wanted more creative control. They wanted to be completely funded. Sony said, we aren't going to fund your group, and moved on to grabbing people from other studios within Sony to work on The Last of Us. So it says here, but Sony never fully acknowledged the team's existence or gave them the funding and support needed to succeed in the highly competitive video game market. According to people involved, the studio never even got its own name. Instead, Sony moved ownership of The Last of Us remake to its original creator, Naughty Dog, a Sony-owned studio behind many of the company's best-selling games. So yeah, they moved it to Naughty Dog. And then it goes down here, and they talk about the leadership. They talk about what's going on and how obviously that the people who wanted to get that funding were upset about not getting that funding to work on the game and come up with more ideas. And then they go on here to talk about this fixation on teams that churn out hits is creating unrest across Sony's portfolio of game studios. Oregon-based Sony Bend, best known for its 2019 open world action game Days Gone, tried unsuccessfully to pitch a sequel that year, according to people familiar with the proposal. Although the first game had been profitable, its development had been lengthy and critical reception was mixed, so a Days Gone 2 wasn't seen as a viable option. Here's one of the big issues. Days Gone came out. I thought it was an okay game. I don't think it was like this great hidden gem game that a lot of people had made it out to be. I tried playing through it twice, and both times about 7 to 10 hours in, I got pretty bored and stopped playing it. But it's definitely a decent game, and for some people, I'm sure they absolutely love it. But because it wasn't a Last of Us, because it wasn't an Uncharted, because it wasn't a God of War, it obviously didn't sell as well as those games. But at the same time, it's also a brand new IP that takes a little bit of time to get off the ground. So instead of allowing them to continue to work on that concept, because Days Gone 2 could have been something absolutely just incredible, there was a good foundation there, they didn't allow them to work on to Days Gone 2. Instead, they want them to focus on stuff that is guaranteed to sell very well, aka a Last of Us remake. And just backing up here, and this also has to go back to when they closed Japan studios and everything, which made games like Gravity Rush, right? That was called, yeah. Sony reorganized the development office in Japan, resulting in mass departures of people who worked on less well-known but acclaimed games such as Gravity Rush and Everybody's Golf. Gravity Rush was a great game. I actually played that on the PlayStation Vita. And the company has informed developers that it no longer wants to produce smaller games that are only successful in Japan. That's another thing. A lot of people like to focus on just the stock or the console stocks and everything as to why Xbox is doing better, and some weeks, Xbox is selling better in Japan. Not that this is a direct correlation, but I feel like there's a lot of people in Japan who are turned off by some of the things that Sony have been doing, such as not wanting to produce smaller games that would only be successful in Japan when they have a huge market base there. You'd think they would definitely want to capitalize on that a ton. So getting back to the Bend Studios, instead, one team at the studio was assigned to help Naughty Dog with a multiplayer game, while a second group was assigned to work on a new Uncharted game with supervision from Naughty Dog. Some staff, including top leads, were unhappy with this arrangement and left. Bend's developers feared they might be absorbed into Naughty Dog, and the studio's leadership asked to be taken off of the Uncharted project. They got their wish last month and now are working on a new game of their own that will be part of a brand new franchise. So they're finally getting that. Emphasizing big hits can also be counterproductive because sometimes games that start small can turn to massive successes. In 2020, Sony didn't put much marketing muscle behind the quirky video game creation system Dreams. By PlayStation owns Media Molecule. As a result, PlayStation may have missed out on its own version of Roblox, a similar video game tool. Parent company Roblox Corporation went public earlier this year and now is valued at $45 billion. Is Dreams still a hit? I don't know. I never got into Dreams, but is it still a hit? I don't know if anybody's ever played Dreams. It looks pretty cool. The stuff that you could do in it when they released it looked more advanced than like a Roblox or like a Minecraft type of thing, just in terms of the graphics that you could get out on it. So now we get back to Mumbauer and his crew, which is that crew of people who support the different games at Sony and then wanted to make their own creation, wanted to be funded to have their own studio, and it ended up not happening. It says here, for their first solo project, Mumbauer and his crew wanted to pitch something that would be well received by their bosses at Sony. Recognizing the risks and expense involved with developing a new game from scratch, they decided to focus on remaking older games for the PS5. Remakes are considered a safe bet since it's cheaper to update and polish an old game than it is to start from scratch, and they can be sold both to nostalgic old fans and curious new ones. So that's it right there as to why The Last of Us remake, based on everything we're seeing, essentially is a cash grab. I know people don't like that, but it essentially is, because Sony knows that the name, the IP, the notoriety of The Last of Us is so huge that they can upgrade the graphics. They can put some new flashy animation, or animations don't even look new, but some new flashy stuff in there, the explosions, and they can do all of this stuff, and they will release it. And even though there's a lot of backlash right now based off of the trailer that we saw, based off of the leaks that we saw, based off the fact that there is no new gameplay for this game is still probably going to sell extremely well amongst their customer base, the nostalgic fans who just don't care and want to spend the money on it, and then people who have never played the game before. And if that does happen, if the game sells really, really well, which I think it will, I know there's a lot of backlash on Twitter, it's going to be more of the same, I think, coming from Sony down the line, because they're going to look at those numbers, and it's going to be Jim Ryan's virtuous cycle that he's going to be able to continue to show people, show investors, and say, hey, look, my strategy of the virtuous cycle of not putting games into a subscription service and doubling down on our blockbuster IPs over and over and over again will make us the most money right now. And that's the issue at the end of the day, because everything that we've seen from the Last of Us remake, it's not good. I mean, that's the way I say it. It just isn't good. And you see people out here trying to like defend it. I mean, you have, so this was, there were the leaks, and this guy here works at Naughty Dog, Vice President of Naughty Dog. He says, leaks really suck, especially when we're right on the cusp of an asset drop. It's disheartening and frustrating to teams who have put their hearts making awesome things for our fans. That being said, here's a deep dive into what's new for The Last of Us Part 1, including some gameplay. Then they showed off the gameplay, and yeah, the graphics look great. But in my opinion, it essentially kind of confirms what the leaks we're talking about, which is that there's no gameplay. So they're just putting a shine on it. They're remastering, I guess, the remaster. and then they're going to release it at $70. Now here, the biggest thing of all with this is that if they did this game, they released it at $40 or put it into PlayStation Plus Premium or something, I don't think anybody would have an issue. But the fact that there's no new gameplay and they cut out the multiplayer, and people are always trying to make reference to like Skyrim, because Skyrim, how many times did that game get released? And yeah, I agree. Like Skyrim, it gets annoying when they keep releasing the same game over and over and over again, because they know it just makes the money. Like even the anniversary edition, there was new content in there, but essentially it was the same game. They didn't take any content out of it, and the price, and it was in Game Pass, and two, correct me if I'm wrong, but the anniversary edition wasn't a full price game, was it? I don't remember it being a full price game, or the one that just came out, or you could pay a little bit just to upgrade it. There's like, I don't know, there's so many other games out there that get remade and then they resell it at cheaper. Like I'm thinking about the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy. It had 3 games in one. And then you think about the Spyro Reignited trilogy or whatever. Again, I think that was like 3 games in one. All of those games, those are all remakes. Like those were done by Toys for Bob, and you can really see the huge graphical update in those games. They didn't cut content, and then they didn't sell it at a $70 price tag. And that's the biggest issue here with The Last of Us remake, is PlayStation knows that they have fans that are going to go out there. They're going to not care about the fact that it's essentially a cash grab, and that Sony's taking advantage of their fandom and charging them $70 on it. And if everyone goes out and buys this game and it sells extremely well, what's going on here in this article is going to continue to happen. You're going to see teams that want to make a sequel to a new IP, such as Days Gone, a team that wants to get funded to come up with new creative stuff. And Sony's going to say, no, we need you working on the big name titles, remakes of other games, remakes of Uncharted, remakes of older God of Wars, all that type of stuff. And that's where it's going to go. So it'll be extremely interesting to me to see how well this game sells, because I think that's going to be the kicker as to what this is for the industry. Because if this does sell very well, it's I don't know. I think it's a bad thing for the industry. I think it's a bad thing for PlayStation, for their fans, because it seems like they're not going to be getting newer stuff. But if we continue on here, it says a team originally planned on a remake of the first Uncharted game released by Naughty Dog in 2007. And even that, a remake of the first Uncharted game would have been a better idea than the remake of 2013's The Last of Us. That idea quickly fizzled because it would be expensive and require too much added design work. And that makes sense. A 2007 game versus a 2013 game that came out at the very end of the life cycle of the PS3 that already looked great. It probably doesn't need nearly as much work to upgrade that as you would need for the 2007 Uncharted. Instead, the team settled on a remake of Naughty Dog's 2013 melancholic zombie hit, The Last of Us. At the time, Naughty Dog was in the thick of development on the sequel, The Last of Us Part 2, which would introduce higher fidelity graphics and new gameplay features. If Mumbauer's crew remade the first game to have a similar look and feel, the two games could be packaged together for the PlayStation 5. In theory, this would be a less expensive proposition than remaking Uncharted, since The Last of Us was more modern and wouldn't require too many gameplay overhauls. Then, once Mumbauer's group had established itself, it could go on to remake the first Uncharted game and other titles down the road. But pivoting from doing finishing work for other games to making your own is difficult, since original development teams are competing against hundreds of other teams from all over the world with varying levels of experiences and success. So I guess they thought making, when they mentioned they're bundling the two together, which they essentially could have done, and instead of bundling a Last of Us remake and The Last of Us Part 2, like imagine they could have come out with The Last of Us remake and probably gotten away with it more right now if this game released in September and it came with The Last of Us Part 2. You would have gotten both games in one package. That would have maybe made people less upset over this. But that's obviously not what they did. And on top of that, if you guys remember at Summer Games Fest, when Neil Druckmann came out onto the stage with his crew, I found it hilarious when they were like, the multiplayer is too ambitious, so that we have to cut it. We have to make it its own standalone game now, on top of giving you a Last of Us remake game, which essentially has no updated gameplay from what we know so far. So not only did they release a game for the third time in 10 years that they're going to make a lot of money off of, because they know it's going to make them a lot of money, and they did that instead of making new IPs. They cut the multiplayer from The Last of Us Part 2, which is something that they had promised people who have The Last of Us Part 2. And they're saying they want to make it a standalone game because it's too ambitious, which I don't buy for literally a second. What I think they did with the multiplayer is that Sony has been saying that they got to get more games as a service games, and they got to release 10 by 2026. And Jim Ryan's probably making all these promises to investors that, hey, look at the video game industry, look at the amount of money that games as a service makes, and we're going to get a chunk of that money. We're going to release this amount of games. So, and to fulfill that promise, he's probably like, okay, let's take The Last of Us multiplayer that we were supposed to release with The Last of Us Part 2, and let's make it its own standalone game. You guys can have a bit more time. You guys can add a couple more things to it. We'll say it's more ambitious, and then boom, we'll have a new games as a service game that will be part of that 10 games that are supposed to be released by 2026, and we'll be on our way, especially with the acquisition of Bungie and with Destiny 2. So that's what I think happened. We'll see how the game turns out. Maybe it is just massive and it'll be really good, but Sony is clearly just really doubling down on the Last of Us IP because they know the amount of money that's going to make. Even The Last of Us Part 2, we're hearing now that it sold like 10 million or something. Some people think that is enough. I think it was Colin Moriarty who was saying that he was surprised and that isn't that many copies for such an important or popular IP, which I was kind of surprised too. But there was so much backlash with The Last of Us Part 2 before it came out, just with the story and everything that got leaked. And then now this is getting leaked, so we'll see how it affects this. But I mean, if they sell 10 million copies of this remake, I feel like they will be okay with that, because it's the third time they're releasing it. So is The Last of Us remake a cash grab? The simple answer is yes. It is a cash grab. No matter how people try to spin it, it is. I mean, I don't know how you can look at this in a positive way and say this is like something new and exciting, something that fans wanted. Like, who wanted Last of Us remake? I can't think of anybody who wanted it. I never saw people talking about this. And at the end of the day, what I think too is that it doesn't matter if you're an Xbox fan, if you're a PlayStation fan, if you're a Nintendo fan, if you're a PC fan, if you are a Steam Deck fan. What else have we got out here? If you are a mobile game fan, stuff like this, you don't want to see do well simply because you don't want the industry to do this. If this does really well, you're going to see other people copycatting this, taking a game, saying it's this big updates to things. And that reminds me of another thing. I always get off on a tangent here, but if you go to like the description of The Last of Us, I'm not going to pull it up, but if you go to the description of The Last of Us remake on the PlayStation blog, it says like brand new gameplay mechanics, updated combat, like all of this stuff, which I don't know. I didn't see any of that in the reveal. But if this does sell well, I feel like you're gonna have a lot of companies looking at this and saying, "Hey, we can take a game that's really popular, has been out for 10 years or less, and we can make it a couple of times and just pitch it as something as a remake, put a nice cover of graphics on it, and it won't cost us nearly as much as having to make a brand new IP or make a sequel to a game, and we could just keep doing that instead of coming up with new creative ideas." So that's why I'm worried. That's why I think like if this sells extremely well, I may lose a little bit of hope, but we'll wait and see. What do you guys think? I rambled on that one for a long time because I think it's important. I really do. I really think that this game is an important thing to follow and how well it sells and how well it does. Maybe I'm over exaggerating it. I don't know. I feel like going forward, if it's, like I said, if it sells really well, it could have effects across the entire industry.
Bye.